This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Kyle Lee, Warren Shaw, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. An exciting show right in the crux of the summer. And man, oh man, we cannot wait to delve right into it. A show like this, I cannot do it by myself. And I know I have to do it with my right-hand man, 50 grand, NBA aficionado, Diamond contributor, writer for the illest websites, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna, PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It is hot and heavy up here, Shaw. Are you really cool where you be in the Fort Lauderdale area, man?
I'm great, man, and it's just great to have such an amazing show on tap for our listeners. We just have so much to get into, a lot that deals with like the social climate around the NBA and in the world in general too. So salute to all the fans listening to the NBA Baseline. I hope you enjoyed this week's show. We're gonna jump right in, man.
No, listen, man, that's a great show that we have lined up. No questions asked. In a few moments, we will have Mike Saunders, former NBA head trainer for the New York Knicks. He's also former president for the Trainers Association for the NBA. He's going to jump on board to talk about the training industry. And then in a little while, we'll have Hudson Taylor. He is the founder and executive director of Athlete Ally, an initiative that is just doing phenomenal work. And he's going to help jump on board to discuss further about the impactful move that the NBA deciding to move the 2017 All-Star Game out of Charlotte. Just a great show we have lined up, and I cannot wait to do it with my man Shaw. Listen, you know how we do, man. You know how to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. We always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. Available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Microsoft TuneIn, Player FM, Google Music. Also available on the Roku channel. So we ask you to use any of these platforms so you can listen to this awesome show that we have lined up for you. Now, our fans and our listeners, you know how we like to continue to promote and push the product of the Baseline, the podcast, and all of our affiliates. We always tell you, as the NBA season approaches, we want you dripped up and dip down in the favorite NBA gear. And the way to go about doing that is by linking up with Fan Essentials. So how would you like to get all of your favorite NBA teams merchandise delivered straight to your doorstep? You need to check out fanessentials.net. All you do is subscribe, pick your team. Every month, you get the team's gear shipped right to your door. They find the sports gear that you don't have, and each fan will have a box full of some amazing stuff. It's a great gift idea for any sports fan. The prices start at $14.99 to $34.99. Visit fanessentials.net. Use the promo code BASELINE and check for 30% off on the first month. That's 30% off. So all you need to do is visit fanessentials.net. Get all the essentials you need to get you psyched up and ready for this upcoming NBA season. You know how we do, and you know how we like to set it off. It is time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And this week we have a really great guest on board with us. We often talk about legends of the game in the context of just players, but there's so much that goes into this great game of basketball, and it happens not just by the players and the coaches. It also is kind of, it happens even behind the scenes. The people who are making these athletes play to the peak performance to give us the entertainment that we long for so many years. One person in particular who, if New York Knicks fans can at least rest their laurels. If they can never win a championship, they can at least say they've had probably one of the best in trainers to develop these athletes, to keep these athletes in their peak condition. He is Mike Saunders. He is a former trainer for the New York Knicks. Definitely someone who has been a part of some of the great success that this Knicks franchise has supplanted in so many years. Mike, thank you so much for joining us this week and talking about really a topic and conversation that I don't think gets to be talked about too much, but is so relevant when we're now talking about in today's NBA in the conditioning of athletes.
Well, first of all, gentlemen, thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to talk about athletic training physical therapy and conditioning. The trainer is somebody who's not usually noticed until there's an injury, and then something catastrophic may happen, then he's brought into the forefront. But the trainer is arguably the hardest working guy on the staff, proverbially the first to arrive and the last to leave, but it's often a labor of love for him. So the athletic trainer is an indispensable part of the basketball team, but somebody who really enjoys what he does.
Something that I always wanted to ask Mike, when it comes to trainers, because a lot of different teams have had, success, I think, when it comes to that, and having more success in keeping some of their athletes healthy and things like that. But when you were firmly supplanted with the Knicks organization and you saw maybe some other teams struggled with maybe some of their guys, some injuries that you had, how often do you guys communicate coming across teams? Obviously, you have to take care of your own shop first and foremost. But if you see somebody struggling with an injury, do you talk amongst yourselves, say, hey, did you try this? Did you try that with some of the other trainers that you may have a relationship throughout the league?
There are no secrets among us. We share all the information. We have access to the same information. So we all start on the same plane, so to speak. Nobody knows more or less than the other. They're all very, very qualified, very knowledgeable. They're all familiar with cutting edge techniques and skills. So nobody really has an edge that way. Sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. You have some players who are injury prone, others who have collision type injuries that you can't prevent. So there are no secrets among us. We all possess the same skills and knowledge.
Mike Saunders joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Mike, one of the accolades that I'd like to kind of touch upon is, you've been within this practice for quite some time. You've served as the president of the National Basketball Trainers Association for 2 terms, 97, 98, and then 98 and 99. And one of the things that I think is important, is especially when we talk about in this day and age, is the conglomerate, so to speak, the importance of unionizing within each faction. NBA Players Association, the owners, and I think even especially now with the trainers, that they are collaborating together in ways to, one, make sure that they are taking care of their own, and also two, to make sure that I guess that there is a standard that is set amongst all of the trainers to have accountability, so that the product of the NBA continues to maintain at a high level. When you were the president, and for especially around that time frame, because we're talking about the 90s and how there was so many great athletes within that span. What was some of the important things that you saw within that time frame, that really gave you a real good reason to feel like, wow, it's awesome being the president in this magnitude, to do the thing that I love and to have an impact in that capacity during this time of the NBA?
Well, I was very proud and privileged to be a member of the National Basketball Association, Trainers Association. My peers, I had the tremendous love for them and appreciation for them, and to be their leader for those 2 years was really a privilege for me. I think they're, as a group, maybe the best guys that there ever were. And I mean that sincerely. We're a very strong fraternity. We cared about each other. And, sometimes there's safety in numbers when you get a group together. The purpose of the unionization of the trainers was really to qualify for a pension plan. Years ago, Joe O'Toole, who was the great trainer for the Atlanta Hawks, some other people in the coaching fraternity, and I think Jerry Colangelo as well, put forth a pension plan for coaches, assistant coaches, and trainers. So that was the main impetus at that time to form one group. Ironically, though, now today, there's not that much safety in terms of job security for athletic trainers. For whatever reason, a lot of athletic trainers and great athletic trainers are being let go by their teams. And it's something that's truly a source of contention for me, and makes me very upset to know that people who I've mentored and who I knew as athletic trainers are being let go. And it's happening far too often now. So although we have one group, the NBATA, these jobs are not very safe right now.
Well, Mike, and why is that? Because I mean, there's obviously a lot of player movement, I think, within the league, especially in this environment, in this landscape. But when you were doing it, you were there, almost 30 plus years in the Knicks organization, and you were able to stay through the transition and things like that. What has happened in the training industry? Why things are so fluid currently?
I'm not really sure. I wish I could put my finger on it. I've discussed it with people within organizations and within the training fraternity. I'm not really sure what it is. We saw with this free agent market how much teams invest in their players. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of money. Perhaps they think they're not getting their return because the players getting hurt. But trainers don't get players hurt. Trainers get players better. Also, there's a lot of movement, not just among players, but among front office personnel. And sometimes they want to put their own stamp immediately on their organization, so they figure they'll change the trainer and then maybe an assistant coach or something just to put their stamp on it. I think they're choosing the wrong people. The trainers are the most loyal people in the organization, and probably the most underpaid and underappreciated. I was able to work with 13 different coaches, and that says a lot about the stability of the Knick organization in terms of respect for a trainer. But today, a new general manager or coach comes in, and they say a new broom sweeps clean, and unfortunately, the trainer is not a secure position anymore.
Mike Saunders joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast in our segment of The Breakdown, and we're discussing the training industry in the NBA, and obviously the bucking trend right now is the short leash that most of the young trainers are enduring. And it's interesting, Mike, that, especially in the context of what we're speaking of, you've been surrounded by some legendary players, guys like Patrick Ewing and, who just recently passed away, Anthony Mason. Our condolences, obviously, to his family. But man, when he was on the basketball court, that guy was a beast, and he was physical. Charles Oakley, physical, brooding guys. And with that physicality comes, the basically having to endure possible injuries. These guys, they were able to be on the basketball court and substantially be able to play long careers for the most part. And a lot of that, I would think, would be attributed to the knowledge and you being there by their side. And is that what it feels like now, even as we speak? And I understand so far the short leash regarding the young trainers, but it seems like the physicality of the game clearly has always been questioned now at this particular point. But now how much more important is the trainer's input in the training process for these guys to maintain their health?
Well, look, I can't take credit for the longevity of Patrick Ewing, of Charles Oakley, of Anthony Mason, and all that. Like any success for a player, it's a team effort. And I was just a part of that team to keep these guys on the court playing at a top level. Most of the credit has to go to those players. Those are very unique players. Great players, great people. So, that credit has to go to them. You talk about the physicality of the game today. I think it's in certain ways less physical because there's less banging. Players can't get away with hand checking and hard fouls, which I think is a good part of the game. Although I think it may have been Game 5 this year, the finals. It was like deja vu, where it was like the old style with a lot of banging and referees let a lot go. I'm not sure if that's good or bad for the game, but it was nice to see that little change. But I'll tell you what happens. A lot of players don't crash out of the league. They rust out of the league, meaning it's not a catastrophic injury that ends their career. It's little accumulative aches and pains and little injuries that accumulate and finally end a career. I had the opportunity to go to Orlando this summer to watch Summer League. My son works for the Miami Heat in basketball operations, so we drove up. I'm living in South Florida now, so we drove up to Orlando and watched Summer League, and I was sitting right in the front, and I was amazed at the physicality of these players and athleticism, meaning they can jump so high and they're so quick. But, you can't defy the laws of physics. What goes up must come down. And the higher you jump, the harder you're going to land. And that's what's going to cause, I think, a lot of injuries moving forward, that these players play above the rim so much that when they land, if they don't even land on someone else's foot and sustain an injury, they're going to land on the court, and all their joints are going to feel that impact. So having these players who have such great jumping ability, they also need to strengthen the muscles to accumulate that trauma.
So I want to ask you, a little bit. I think that's some great insight as to where we're heading in the training industry. But I want to get into some of the past, if you want, some stories that you'll be able to share with us potentially. I'm sure you've been asked this question a million times, but for our listeners, can you share, like maybe one of the more difficult injuries that you've had to work with a player on, specifically with the Knicks organization?
Well, I don't know how old your audience is. But a player from the 80s who was one of the most spectacular athletes that I ever worked with, and one of the great basketball players who I don't really think gets his due, is Bernard King.
Oh, yeah.
If you remember Bernard was a scoring machine. I always described him as half athlete, half artist. He was incredible. Great. He's a Hall of Famer. He is in the Hall of Fame. I was privileged to be up in Springfield when he was inducted. Bernard was a great, great player, exciting player, and a great person as well. And we had a wonderful relationship, but we were in Kansas City. That's how far back this injury goes. I think 1985. Bernard sustained an ACL injury, anterior cruciate ligament injury. It was a rupture of the ligament. At that time, that injury was often a career-ending injury. Today, with modern surgical techniques and physical therapy, it is a season-ending injury. It is no longer career-ending or career-threatening. But that was a very serious injury, and we had a terrific team at the time. But unfortunately, with Bernard out of the lineup, we were not nearly as successful. But Bernard was a great player and sustained that serious injury. But because of the surgery from Dr. Norman Scott, who was the team physician, and Bernard's determination to get back, he did return to an all-star level.
Wow. And it's remarkable because I often joke around with the idea. It says, listen, before there was LeBron, there was already a king that the NBA had, was fortunate to be able to see play the game in Bernard King. I mean, he was absolutely phenomenal. And, it's interesting. He's one of the few players where his game is spoken not just in, the arenas amongst the NBA community, but in every conceivable playground, in the city. Like everyone talks about the game of basketball, Earl to Pearl Monroe. You're probably going to mention Bernard King's name, in the same breath at some particular point, because his game was just that sweet. Like he was so legit.
No question. And I was thinking it did invoke the memory of Earl Monroe. I had the pleasure of working with Earl for 2 years. My first 2 years with the Knicks, Earl was still around. And talk about exceptional people. I just absolutely love Earl Monroe. He is, to me, just God's gift. And that's as a person, never mind how great a player and exciting and innovative play he was, from the playgrounds of Philadelphia to going to college at Winston-Salem, then starting in the NBA with the Baltimore Bullets, and then, incredibly traded to the New York Knicks to have the backcourt with Walt Frazier and Earl Monroe. I mean, that was incredible. And they won the championship in 1973. Unfortunately, I was watching the games on TV. I was not the trainer at the time. I came 5 years later. But, you mentioned, Earl Monroe is a legend, and Bernard King as well as a legend. And Bernard played, from Brooklyn, then went to University of Tennessee.
I'm really interested in knowing how important is the communicative relationship with you and the players. Especially when we just spoke about, a little bit earlier about the heightened tension that is going on with regards to the stability of trainers and their tenure with organizations. How important is it for the trainers to really build that communicative bridge to be able to let them know, not just specifically for injuries, but even maintaining themselves at to be able to play at a high standard? Because just like what you said earlier before, as much as, we're trying, we love always giving trainers credit. We see some of these injuries that some of these players are enduring and going through, and we know that these are probably going to be injuries that will reoccur. And I often say, look, if these kids knew all of this stuff, they would already have their second careers laid out for them. They would be able to patch themselves up anytime that they wanted to. But obviously, they have people behind them. They have a staff behind them that is in their ear telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing in order to be able to be back on that basketball court. How important is that communication?
Well, yeah. There are two components to communication, and there's two components to every job. Every job has two components: the science of the job and the art of the job. The science of the job is knowing what skills to have and the knowledge and information. The art of the job is how it's delivered. And if you don't have good communication skills, and if you don't build and develop the confidence that the players have in you, then regardless of what you tell them, it won't stick. So you have to develop a good relationship with the players, one built on professionalism, knowledge, and confidence, and then you give them the information. And yes, it's important to look in the short range, how to prepare for a game, how to prepare for a season, and how to prepare for a career and a post-career, what to do. So, communication and imparting your knowledge and experience to the players is very important. When I started in 1978, I was learning from the players. They were teaching me the ropes, showing me the ropes. And I was there with the Knicks for 27 years, and some players that I had early in my career, their children, their sons, were trying out for the NBA. So it's I spanned a full generation that way, and along with experience comes knowledge, and I try to impart that to the players as well. People play the game. What do you want on your tombstone? Kind of thing to sum up your life or your career. And for me, it would be I not only cared for the players, but I cared about them as well. They meant a lot to me. We built up wonderful relationships that continue to this day. And I really cared about them.
Yeah. And I think, that's something that really is amazing when you look at, because it even leads me to my next question. I guess you kind of even answered it to some degree already, because NBA and all sports considered supposed to be a business, et cetera, et cetera. But you're saying that there really is that human touch, if you will. But how hard is it for you? Because like you even talked about some guys rust out of the league, if you will. How hard is it for you to see guys really to kind of deteriorate because of age or whatever the case may be? Or, when an organization makes a decision to say, you know what, we're going to get this guy out of here now because he's getting older and can't produce anymore. How hard is that for you as a trainer, you probably have a more of a personal connection than maybe some of the front office guys do?
Well, it depends upon the circumstances. Sometimes I'm happy when a player can retire on his own terms, when he doesn't have to, suffer all the aches and pains just to get onto a court. Hopefully, they retire with a lot of money so that they're financially secure. And I only want the best for the players. I'm not happy when I hear about financial problems, family problems, personal problems, or especially health problems. I was particularly upset when Anthony Mason passed away. Anthony and I were very close. We're both from Queens, New York, and I was there from day one when Anthony was with the Knicks. We developed a wonderful relationship. It really hurt me. But right around then, Darryl Dawkins passed away, and Moses Malone passed away. Jerome Kersey passed away. All these things upset me very much. And I talk about caring for people. That's the ultimate. See, people that you cared for and cared about passing away. And that brings me to a project that I'm working on now. I'm working on a TV project, basketball project called B Nation or Basketball Nation. And some people compare it to like an American Idol for basketball. We're trying to find players who kind of fell through the cracks for various reasons, personal reasons, whatever, and giving them a second chance to make it. Wow. And that's the premise of it. And we're also donating money to various charities. My charity, what I'm trying to do is create a network for retired players to get the best health care possible, especially preventive health care. I don't want to see these young, great athletes passing away prematurely. So that's a pet project of mine, creating this network where players can get preventive care, get health care, have access to a gym, a fitness center, so that they can maintain their health as best as possible.
Mike, you and actually we're very glad that you kind of segued into these particular projects that you're working on. And even though I know that you said earlier that you've moved down to South Florida, are you still actively involved with a lot of the fundraising and the programs that you've been a part of while you were working for the Knicks organization? And how is that going, especially now that, obviously you're not up here in the Big Apple, but you're down there. Are you still actively involved with a lot of the programs while you were up here?
Well, my heart is still in New York. My body may be down here in Delray Beach, Florida. My heart is still in New York.
Not a bad place to be down there, by the way, Mike.
No, I have no regrets. I'll be 64 in September. It's a nice lifestyle for me and my wife. My son, as I mentioned earlier, my son Jeffrey works for the Miami Heat, so he's living in Miami. I have a daughter who's actually expecting my first grandchild, expecting a son in November. She lives up in New Jersey.
Congratulations.
So,
Congratulations.
I still, New York is still not even in my rear view mirror. It's still, front and center with me. And I do keep in touch with a lot of people in New York and with the Knicks organization. When Warren contacted me, I think on Facebook, that's one reason why I said, sure, let me, why not do this podcast? I'm still very available and love to help out people, whether it's you guys or maybe the message will get to a larger, broader audience, and maybe they could help out with something. So, yeah, I'm always looking to give a helping hand. That's my nature. That's why I was an athletic trainer. Athletic trainers, in their DNA, is to help people. And I'm still that way, although I'm not working for a team. I'm working for humanity now. So, same thing.
Mike, I think that's an amazing thing. And I just want to share a personal anecdote, for our listeners too. A long time ago, I was a basketball operations intern with the New York Knicks, and that's actually how I met Mike Saunders, 15 plus years ago. In 2001. And Mike was always really kind to me when I was coming down to the trainer's office, and I used to have to drop off tickets for the players, for them to give it to their families and to their personal guys. And Mike was really a nice guy to me then, again, 15 plus years ago, and you can see he's still a great guy, all the way through, 15 years later. So Mike, thank you so much for joining us. And before we let you get out of here, just one more time, tell people what the project is that you're working on, and potentially when it may be available for them to consume.
Yeah, well, it's the project called B Nation, or Basketball Nation. It will be a TV project, more of a reality show than basketball. If you want to put basketball, if you want to watch basketball, watch the NBA. That's the greatest show on earth. Right. But this show incorporates a basketball theme, but it's really a behind-the-scenes look into people's real lives. Struggles they may have had, lessons learned, and giving people a second chance, a second opportunity. We all deserve a second opportunity to do well, and that's what it's really about. That's why I came on board with it. And then also there's a lot of charitable work involved with this project. It's about giving back. And that's certainly always in the forethought of my mind, giving back to society, helping people.
He is former president for the National Basketball Trainers Association. He is a former head trainer for the New York Knicks organization. He's also a former NBA Trainer of the Year. But first and foremost, he is just really an absolute great humanitarian and probably a once in a generation type of person that we are just so fortunate to have on the show. Mike Saunders. Mike, we so appreciate you taking a few minutes of your time, especially being in sunny Delray Beach, Florida, to be able to talk with us about something that you obviously love doing, have always loved doing, and will continue to do. And it benefits us and not just our listeners, but for everyone here who just really needs to just take a moment, have a little introspect in being able to appreciate some of the things that we don't get to talk about. And you being a trainer and you being able to have access to some of our great athletes that we've seen through so many years. It's just absolutely phenomenal. We thank you so much for joining us this week.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and let's do it again sometime.
Awesome. This is The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of The Baseline NBA podcast. And I don't know, Shaw, how you're able to follow up with such a great interview with Mike Saunders. I think I do know. It's being able to have another interesting and well-respected guest following up what we already have is a great show with regards to the recent incidents that has occurred with the NBA and the 2017 NBA All-Star Weekend by having someone who has really been a great advocate, proactively involved, not just in sports in itself, but also from a civil perspective. Hudson Taylor, he is the founder and executive director of Athlete Ally. Hudson, thank you for joining us to talk about a great topic this week, and one that I think is definitely going to be talked about as we head into this upcoming season.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hudson, first of all, we'd like for you to tell our fans and listeners and people in general who Athlete Ally is and what the initiative is and really what you're trying to bring about with the initiative.
Sure. So Athlete Ally is a nonprofit organization working to end homophobia and transphobia in sports. I started the organization 5 years ago, and my backstory is I was a 3-time All-American wrestler, pretty much wrestled my entire life, but was also a theater major. So I grew up on the one hand, having LGBT friends in theater who were treated with respect and dignity. And then on the other, being in a locker room environment that used homophobic and sexist language pretty regularly. And so for me, the whole catalyst to doing this work came my senior year of college. I was wearing an LGBT equality sticker on my headgear to show support. And in response to that, I got about 2,000 emails from closeted athletes from across the country. And so that was really the big moment for me of like, wow, if a wrestler could speak out and make that much of a difference in people's lives, imagine if I had been a professional athlete or a team or a league. And so Athlete Ally, the work we do is really based on a simple belief that there's never been a successful social justice movement for a minority group without the support of the majority. And so if we're going to end homophobia or sexism or any form of discrimination, it can't just be the responsibility of those who are impacted by it, who shoulder the responsibility of ending it. So with Athlete Ally, we do a lot of educational work. I visit about 40 colleges a year, do a lot of training for the NBA and Major League Baseball. This will be my third year doing the rookie orientation for the league. So essentially, who needs to be educated that isn't, and what policies need to be in place that aren't. And then the second piece of our work is around sort of public awareness and realizing that athletes have a tremendous amount of cultural capital. And if we can get coaches and athletes and agents to be talking about LGBT respect and inclusion, that can change the world in a major way. So that's a little bit about the work that we've been doing. And I got to say, it's been incredible to work with the NBA and lead up to this announcement to move the All-Star game.
Well, and I think we'll jump right into that too. I think my first exposure to Athlete Ally, I think, was a few years ago. I was interviewing Kenneth Farid from the Nuggets, and then he admitted that he was a part of the organization and some of the things that he had experienced in his own personal life. But we're obviously talking about this in on our program here too, is the HB2 and what that is and what it has meant now for the NBA in terms of pulling the All-Star game from the city of Charlotte. Can you explain to our listeners a little bit what HB2 was or is, if you really should say, and how important it is for this decision to have been made by the NBA?
Sure. So about a year ago, a little over a year ago, the city of Charlotte passed an LGBT inclusive ordinance that would essentially add protections to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. This was a tremendous step in the right direction and was really something to be applauded from the mayor of Charlotte and all the legislators there. Then what happened, the state of North Carolina didn't like that Charlotte was passing these inclusive laws, and that's where HB2 came from. So HB2 was legislation that would override the civil rights protections that were imposed in Charlotte. And with a specific emphasis on transgender people's access to locker rooms and restrooms. So essentially, the big debate has been about whether or not a person should be able to use the restroom or locker room with which they identify. From a civil rights standpoint, from a LGBT movement standpoint, this is obviously very problematic. Anytime we have separate laws impacting people's access to spaces, that's something that should be avoided. And so in the context of the NBA, I think in other concerts, conferences, where businesses choose to conduct their business is a choice. And so when we look at the 2017 All-Star game, I think the NBA was met with a really difficult decision whether or not to keep the games in a state that had policies that went against the values of the league. And so, it's been a complicated, long discussion, but I have to say, I think the decision by the NBA to move the All-Star game is one that is both historic and very, very important. It says a lot about the culture and climate that the NBA believes in and is trying to create.
Founder and executive director of Athlete Ally, Hudson Taylor, on with us here in our segment of The Drop. And Hudson, leading into that, from your perspective, and we're talking about how the NBA is in many ways, a conduit now that is enacting social change. Of this type of magnitude for you personally, especially on the platform that you're in, how do you utilize this, especially when you go to these schools? And it's a way for you to say, that, we are taking action, because many people are looking at how this could be a smear in the face, obviously, to the city of Charlotte, that there's money to be lost from this. But there's a much bigger, it's something bigger about this has to be brought about from it. And it's exactly to the point of what your initiative brings about.
Yeah. So the big things that I'm excited about as a result of, first, this is the first time in history that a sporting event has been moved in response to anti-LGBT legislation. So that in and of itself is tremendously historic and an important thing that's occurred. But what's interesting is now this sets a precedent. So when we look every year, the NCAA is awarding where they're hosting their championship games. I don't know if you saw, but the day after the NBA made their announcement, the NCAA came out with a questionnaire that they are asking all potential hosts to fill out about the LGBT policies and practices of their city and state. And so there is a very real domino effect that I think is taking place and will take place as a result of the NBA moving the All-Star game. And that's, we're going to see NCAA championships being awarded to more inclusive cities and states. I think that this could have ramifications on the Olympic front. Where are the Olympic Games being awarded? I know that this fall, FIFA is going to be reforming sort of their bidding process for future World Cups. So I know from 2026 on, the World Cup will take into consideration the human rights laws of a country in determining who wins these bids. So everything, this move more than anything else, it helps us create accountability and form a narrative around this idea that hosting a championship event is an honor. It's not a right, right? And so if you want to have the honor of hosting an event that's going to bring hundreds of millions of dollars into your community, then you need to have laws that protect and respect the entirety of your citizens. And so, again, this is huge for our work, and I think it's huge for the history of sports.
I think it's a great platform in general, and I think that, as you mentioned, the NCAA. I think I saw something about the PGA might be trying to, evaluate their participation in the state of North Carolina as well too. And there is a real trickle down effect, as you alluded to. But from a personal perspective, now when you saw, HB2 passed, and that Charlotte had already been awarded the game, what was your personal gut feeling in terms of, did you really think the NBA would have the balls, if you will, to really pull one of their signature events away from the city? Did you really think it was something that happened? I know you were pushing and fighting for it, but in your heart of hearts, did you think it would go down that way?
Well, I think, the NBA of all the leagues, I was most optimistic that if any league was going to be, taking that courageous step to moving the All-Star games, it was definitely going to be the NBA. That being said, I know that these events are not planned overnight. It takes a lot of time, effort, and energy to get it, to be the successful events that it is. And so when you look at just the simple logistics of moving a sporting event, it's a big challenge. You have to find a big block of hotel rooms for all the fans. You need to get, the travel, the lodging, the sponsors. There's a lot of moving pieces to this. So obviously we were pushing and hoping that, either HB2 would be repealed or that the NBA would do the right thing and move the All-Star game. But because this has never happened before, definitely I was probably not, I was optimistic, but definitely not confident, maybe.
Hudson, I'm interested in what does this say about Adam Silver? Sean and I are pro Adam Silver fans, and taking nothing away from the job that David Stern has done, prior. But my perspective is one of the things that I love about commissioners is that they are willing to take the leap. And the leap doesn't necessarily have to fall within the context of the business of the sport. It has to fall within the context of really the social involvement, the globalization, and the brand in which you're trying to project the sport to be. And we're seeing this, Adam Silver is kind of carving his own niche. He's identifying himself to saying, I love, who I learned from under, but I am who I am. And when empowered, I want to be the person to say, the NBA was responsible for this kind of change, whether it be social, whether it be for the sport. What are your thoughts of Adam Silver so far? Not just about this decision, but so far the way that he's conducted himself, especially when we go back, a couple of years ago with regards to the Donald Sterling situation in the Los Angeles Clippers. How have you seen him from your perspective, and really the consensus from Athlete Ally about his job as a commissioner?
So I think, when we look back at sports history, for me, the most memorable individuals have always been those who have used their platform with a purpose, right? So this summer we lost the amazing Muhammad Ali, and you think about those people who are iconic, who have left a real legacy to be emulated, are those who have not backed down from taking, really using those opportunities when social justice and sport intersected. And I think for Commissioner Silver to be consistently sort of aware of that and always leaning into doing that thing that it may be different, it may be difficult, but it's the right thing to do, I think says a tremendous amount about his leadership and about what the values are of the NBA. Because none of these decisions are easy. You have to understand there are fans on both sides of all issues. And so, when the league continues to lean in towards equality, towards social justice, I think it's a courageous step. It's an important step, but it's the type of action that leads a legacy for others to follow.
Real quick, Shaw, before you jump in, I have a quick question to ask you. Based on this decision, and I'm not sure how much involvement you've had so far, Hudson, with regards to the North Carolina area, and specifically, especially the Charlotte community, prior or even during the HB2 bill being overturned. But my thing here is, what is the climate right now from your perspective with that area? Have you received any kind of pushback? Has there been an assertive effort now where your initiative can come in and really not just take advantage of the situation as far as, being able to implement and to continue to have a footing? What's this, have you heard some of the feeling and the temperature of what it's like over there at this particular moment because of what's happened?
Sure. I mean, I think that there are definitely a lot of people who are on both sides, the people who are against HB2, people who are for it, who are sad that the All-Star game is moving. So I think, there's a lot of people feeling different ways about it, because on the one hand, you had an event which was a major platform to talk about these things. And on the other, you now have all this revenue that's moving out of the state. But what I would say is, and this is, we've focused a lot of effort and attention on the All-Star game, but the reality is, the Charlotte Hornets, they're still a member of the Charlotte community. There's going to be 29 other teams and fan bases coming through that state in the next season. So I think a lot of our effort now is, how do we ensure that the LGBT fans in Charlotte, in North Carolina, have the support that they should have? So separate and apart from the All-Star game, we have to acknowledge that there are still people who are being impacted by these laws, and you still have a lot of sporting events that could positively, make a difference about their experience and how they're treated. So, we're looking at doing some more trainings in the coming year with some of the junior NBA coaches. How can we bring this message of respect and inclusion to the youth side of sports, as well as how can we make it clear from a stadium standpoint that LGBT fans can use the restroom with which they identify at any professional sporting event. So those are things definitely top of mind for us. But I think the big takeaway is that despite this being huge news, despite the attention now going to be turning towards New Orleans, there continues to be a population of LGBT people in North Carolina who need our support. And so we're going to be working as hard as we can to provide that support.
Well, as you mentioned, North Carolina as, a city that, as a state that, obviously has lost the All-Star game and still has a lot of work to do. Are there any other major cities, with sports franchises that have similar guidelines or laws that, contribute to the discrimination of the LGBTQ community that you know about? that you can speak of? Are there any other major cities out there right now that are kind of behind the times, like how North Carolina is?
Yeah, I mean, the sad thing is that this type of legislation is being introduced in various forms all over the country. Now, I think what we saw in North Carolina was an extreme example of this type of legislation. But I mean, Georgia had a similar piece of legislation that they were dealing with. And we were able to work really closely with the Atlanta Hawks on their response to that. Now, fortunately, when a lot of these other issues have come up, the voice from the business community and from the sports community has been enough to either meaningfully change the legislation or make sure that it doesn't become law to begin with. So, we've been able to avoid, I think, some of similar situations in other states. But you make a really good point. Like these laws are happening all over the country, and it's only a matter of time before the impact of these laws intersects with where sporting events are being convened. So I think the numbers are a little bit too large to list off. Right. But the other thing I think to realize is, so for instance, in Florida right now, the city of Jacksonville is working on an LGBT inclusive ordinance, but the state of Florida has some problems with the protections that they offer. So you have these instances where you maybe have a city doing the right thing, but you have a state that needs some work. So I think we're going to see a bit more of that also. The difference between state and city policies is going to come to the forefront.
Wow, good old Florida where I live, always doing things funly. So before I let you get out of here, I had another question too. You're saying you're part of the NBA rookie transition program. Just really quickly, how well do you think your message is being received by some of these rookies and young guys coming in? I'm sure they're probably a little bit more acutely aware and more sensitive to some of the needs that are out there in the community per se. But do you find yourself, and again, I know you can't call anybody out, but is it kind of, does any of it go out of one ear and out of the other, especially in the rookie transition program, which is like a weekend of them just being, kind of hammered with stuff, thing after thing after thing? Do you think your message is being well received? And I know the NBA is trying, but how do you think it's going?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we have a few things going for us. One, the average age of a person coming out now is 15 years old. And so, today's rookies, we go around the room and we ask them how many of them have somebody in their life or know somebody who is lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. And, each year that number keeps going up and up and up. And so I think, whenever you're trying to educate people on social justice issues, context is really important. And so with more and more players having people in their lives who are personally impacted by anti-LGBT bias and bullying and discrimination, it certainly makes the work a lot easier. That being said, when you're a professional athlete in the NBA, you have an average career of like 3.5 years. So, I think it's always a challenge to get athletes to a comfortable place where they will be more vocal on these issues. So for us, there's like a bunch of steps of actions. Step one is, hey guys, you don't need to ever use homophobic language. In order to gain respect, you have to give respect. But then step two is, all right, if you're comfortable being respectful in how you conduct yourself and how you treat other people, then you have an enormous opportunity. Even takes 10 seconds to send a supportive tweet. That could make all the difference in the world to your fan base. That could be the difference between a kid picking up a basketball for the first time or not. So it's really just a lot of education about the impact that these players can have on the lives of so many. Obviously, not everybody's going to be passionate. They're not going to want to be vocal. But if everybody can do something, we're going to get to where we want to go.
He is the founder and executive director of Athlete Ally. If you don't know where to go to check out Athlete Ally, go to www.athleteally.org. He is Hudson Taylor. Hudson, just real quick, before we let you go, can someone who is not athletically involved help to participate with your initiative, and what would they need to do in order to show that support?
So I'd say definitely go to our website, athleteally.org. one of the big ways in which we affect change is by tapping into a peer network. So if anybody listening has connections with athletic departments, with coaches, with athletic directors, those are always helpful relationships, because 9 times out of 10, when we're working with a team or a league, it's the very first time that this conversation has ever happened. So one, help us make connections to people in your network. And then two, we just launched a campaign called Every Fan, which is about fan culture and fan conduct. I think we spent a lot of time talking about, what's it going to be like having an out, basketball player. So we spent a lot of time on the athlete side, but I would encourage you to check out our Every Fan campaign, because we're also actively trying to make athletic environments safer and more respectful for LGBT fans. So check us out at athleteally.org. You can follow us on Twitter. But all of this work doesn't happen without us working together. So please do reach out and get involved.
Hudson, we so appreciate you taking a few minutes of your time to help talk about Athlete Ally, to give your perspective on the impactful decision of the NBA moving the All-Star game out of Charlotte for 2017. And we just thank you so much for being a part of us this week and really giving our listeners something to chew on as we continue to make these efforts to bring about better social change.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
USA basketball training camp is over with. Now they're in the exhibition mode, Shaw. What has impressed you so far about this team so far?
Early games just shown that this team is really prepared to win the gold. No question that they're the best team out there in the country, in the nation. And they're going to get it done. DMC looking really slim.
The world, forget the nation.
Very true. DMC looking slim and getting things done. Paul George looking right. Kyrie Irving. I think we're going to have a great successful Olympic run as always, and I can't wait to see them do it.
All right, man. IT and Double G have linked up together again. The Boston Celtics signing Gerald Green. Those two guys formerly playing with the Phoenix Suns, made for some exciting backcourt basketball. Can they bring that to the table for this upcoming season for the Celtics?
Smart move by the Celtics, getting Gerald Green on a veteran minimum deal. Come in there, gives him some offensive punch off the bench, can shoot the three a little bit too. He's going to have to learn to play defense on a more regular basis. But I like this move for them as opposed to the other guy they were chasing, which was Chase Budinger. I like Gerald Green's decision a lot better than that. Very
nice transition. I think he'll probably improve his defensive efforts when you have Coach Brad Stevens talking behind your ear. The Indiana Pacers signed Aaron Brooks, formerly from the Chicago Bulls. Looks like the Indiana Pacers are quietly putting together a formidable basketball team.
Yeah, very scary. AB going to give them some offensive punch as well, too, behind Jeff Teague, the newly acquired Jeff Teague. So completely new look for what the Pacers are doing next season. We'll see if Nate McMillan can get those guys playing at the offensive pace that Larry Bird wants them to, and that in turn leads to them, getting into the top of the conference at some point, too. Pacers definitely a better team to watch in the Eastern Conference next year. Definitely.
Rudy Gay, Greg Monroe, Jahlil Okafor all remaining in trade discussions, Shaw. Who do you think is likely to get moved first?
I think Okafor is probably the most likely to be moved, then followed by Greg Monroe. Gay obviously being third on that list, but I think there's a good possibility by all of them. Monroe has getting some interest from the New York Knicks. Okafor still with some interest from the Boston Celtics. Rudy Gay with the LA Clippers. Who knows what's going to happen? But I think at least one of these two guys will definitely find a new home by training camp.
All right, Shaw. And finally, talking about social change and social justice, how about some sports justice? The WNBA president has decided to rescind the fines that they were prepared to levy on players for their proactive initiative regarding the recent shootings that have taken place. The players wearing black warm-ups in their protest or in their support of the Black Lives Matter movement and the honoring of the slain police officers. Shaw, is this a good move by the WNBA to not fine the players?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're just seeing the WNBA and the NBA making all the right moves when it comes to these types of decisions. They understand that it's a very, very tense social climate right now, and they don't want to do anything to upset those bases, if you will. So when players stand up for for what is right, if you will, you got to support them, even if it goes against team uniform policy, if you will. Go ahead and let that go, and let the players have that way to express themselves.
I think what's even more equally impressive is that the WNBA obviously caring about the fact that players are going to continue these efforts some way, somehow, that they're taking the Olympics break as an opportunity to sit down with the players and the unions to come up with better ways so that these players can show their support, or to basically give that platform that they would like to have to talk about these particular injustices that are happening without compromising the integrity of the game and also the players' ability to continue to earn a living playing the sport that they love.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, and the NBA continues to do, and WNBA continues to do a great job. They know that these players have social reach. They are outspoken. They aren't just mindless players out there just playing a game. They're very, very in tune and in touch with what's going on in social communities out there. So let them have their way to express themselves.
And listen, let's give a quick shout out to Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo Anthony has been in the forefront, especially now in recent weeks. Apparently, he's putting together a meeting of politicians, players, and a meeting of the minds. And who would have thought, Carmelo Anthony, everybody talks about Carmelo Anthony is only after that dollar. Well, he's after obviously something else. And I just completely want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that he is doing his part to really bringing about this and then not letting this die down, that the NBA obviously needs to be active, but more importantly, players should be active in these efforts as well.
Yeah, he's not playing any games when it comes to that, and I salute his efforts and all the other athletes out there getting involved and trying to make a difference out there, because it's a crazy time, crazy time to be alive. Crazy things happening within our nation right now, and we've all got to do better and do our part. So salute Carmelo Anthony and all the other athletes out there trying to make a change.
Man, this has been a phenomenal show, Shaw. Having Mike Saunders, having Hudson Taylor on board, really one of the best shows that we've done this year. And ultimately, man, I just thoroughly enjoyed sitting down, talking with both of these guys and getting their views and perspective of things that we don't normally have an opportunity to discuss when it comes to the NBA and the impacts that they are continually having off the court, more so than it's always been about what happens on the court.
Yeah, and I think these, everything that we discuss on this show is something that is always kind of in the background of the NBA, and it's always important, but obviously we focus more so on what's going on the court on a regular basis. But it's great to be able to highlight these things and these two great topics from the training perspective, and obviously from the athlete ally perspective as well, to really give our listeners and fans out there a taste of what's happening behind the scenes and why it's so important to be involved and to know about these things, because it really does, it's kind of all the things that make the NBA work and what make the NBA so great in general. So this is a great way to send our listeners off for a week or so, as my man here is going on vacation. There will be no show next week. So, definitely chew on this for the next few weeks and listen to it, subscribe to it, rate it, give us all the feedback that we can handle, and we'll definitely get right back with you guys.
Definitely, man. And we listen again. We love and appreciate everything that the supporters for the Baseline NBA podcast. This is what continues to drive us to do the things that we do and bring the people that we have on and have the conversations that we love having. We like to try to give people what they want. And more importantly, we like to be able to bring things to the table, innovative and worthy of discussion when it comes to the sport that we love following. Once again, we'd like to thank everybody continuing to show their support for the Baseline. And again, NBA season coming up, we always encourage you to get down with Fan Essentials. They will find the right sports gear for you. Each fan box comes packed with some amazing gear, so be sure to go to fanessentials.net. Prices start from $14.99 to $34.99. Use the promo code BASELINE, 30% off of your first month. When you sign on with Fan Essentials, be sure to go to fanessentials.net to get all of the Fan Essential gear you need to get you prepped and ready for the upcoming NBA season. Once again, we'd like to thank Mike Saunders, Hudson Taylor for hopping on board with us and being a part of our show. For the Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys, and we'll catch up with you next time.